So talk a little bit about what the climate was like, or what came first, improv or comedy in San Francisco, or stand-up?
Well, yeah, for sure. In '75, when I moved here, they were just starting to change over at the Holy City Zoo from folk singing to stand-up comedy. And there wasn't any improv to my knowledge at that time. So for me, I would say stand-up was much more prevalent at the time than improv. And there were some improv workshops. The main one that I knew about and that I went to, the first one I ever went to, was Frank Kidder's workshop over on Union Street in North Beach. And that was just an amazing workshop, not because of him, but at least he had the business sense or whatever to start it. But it was it was called The Intersection, and it was a performing space, but also a former church, which it is now a church in 2019. So I lived around the corner, so of course that was a no-brainer to go there for for the classes that he had, and that's where I met a lot of people that were very much into doing stand-up, but also improv, and that's where I met Robin and Terry and Susan. And they were the ones that actually started Femprov along with Teresa Roberts. And they knew that I was doing stand-up at the time and said, oh, would you like to join the group? And I didn't think they were serious. I thought, oh, yeah. So they said, yeah, come to the Holy City Zoo on Sunday night. And I said, sure, and not thinking they were serious at all. I didn't. And the next day, this is way before cell phones. The next day, I got a message saying, we were thinking you would be at the show. And I said, what show? And so I missed the first performance at Femprov, and I probably missed the second one. But after that, I was on stage with Teresa and Susan and Terry, and we needed somebody else, and I knew Carol Roberts, who was doing stand-up.
How did you know Carol? Because you've been on the same stages?
No, I met Carol through John Cantu, who I think was doing a little writing workshop. And I think that's how I met Carol.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never seen her perform except for one time, and I thought she was kind of funny, so, I said, oh, I know somebody, and that's how Carol got included.
Also, in thinking back now, of course, there was a huge history with stand-up, with The Hungry Eye, and Mort Saul, and Phyllis Diller, and, really a long lineage. But that was almost 20 years previous, almost,
Well, at least 15. We're talking 75, so we're saying like 60, so 15 years before. But at the time I was doing stand-up, and all the other people that were doing stand-up at that time, men and women, you could perform, you could do stand-up every single night. You had this club on a Monday, this club on a Tuesday, this club on a Thursday, another club, and a lot of them were in North Beach. So again, since I was living very close by, it was so easy for me to walk down to the Coffee Gallery, or I'm trying to think, the Intersection had stand-up, and the Spaghetti Factory had stand-up, the Savoy Tivoli had stand-up, and there were all different nights. The Holy City Zoo had stand-up. And there were all different, there was a club in Berkeley that, I think it was on Tuesday nights, and it was La Salamander. Mm-hmm. And they let anybody perform. So I performed there a lot.
Uh-huh. And was there a Mustard Seed, or?
The Mustard Seed was the club that I produced shows at, and I also did stand up there, and that was 420 or 430 Mason Street, right around the corner from Macy's. Really, it was on the corner of Mason and Geary, and it was in the basement of the Unitarian Church, and it was a full service stand-up operation. I produced the shows. I did stand up at the shows. I baked the brownies that we sold during this show. And because it was the basement of the church, it was, no alcohol or anything like that. And it was basically almost like a small little theater. And it cost $1 to get in. And one of the reasons why I still love Dana Carvey, to this day, he was just starting to do stand-up, and he was a student at San Francisco State. So it was Saturday nights that we did the shows, and I let him perform all the time. He was funny, don't get me wrong, but he brought the audience. Because there was no alcohol, all these 18, 19, 20-year-old college students could get in, and he had a lot of friends, and he brought the audience. So we made like $20 off Dana, and it worked out great. It worked out great. But that was a fun time to produce the shows and sell brownies and do stand-up, and that was a really fun time.
How many people were doing comedy at that time? I mean, what was the number? I mean, because it was small. It was a handful of people, right?
Right, it was. But it was people like Bob Sarlott was doing stand-up at the time. Bill Rafferty was doing stand-up at the time. And these are people specifically that I remember from the Mustard Seed. So it was Bob Sarlott, Bill Rafferty, Lee Glickstein. I'm trying to think of who else. Dana was a regular. Robin came in. Bobby Slayton. I'll tell you a Bobby Slayton story. Bobby Slayton was very good. He was a very good stand-up. But the Mustard Seed, being the basement of a Unitarian church, they kind of oversaw. They'd come in every now and then to see the shows. And Bobby couldn't clean up his language. So I had to tell him, I said, I'm the authoritarian person, right? And I had to sit down. I said, Bobby, you cannot say those words here. Well, what do you mean? And I said, you just can't. It's the basement of a Unitarian. You want to perform here, you just can't curse. Okay, so thought we had an understanding. The next week he came in, did the same act, same words, same everything. I said, Bobby, you can't perform here anymore. Well, got so incensed and everything, but he understood. Mm-hmm. And it was that kind of an atmosphere in that particular little showcase.
Right.
But it was fun.
Right.
It was fun.